Welcome to a Telltale Books video. I'm Greg, and I'm here to continue my Stephen King series with number 25 from my bibliography of Stephen King. And it's another story from his first short story collection, Night Shift. But originally, it was published in Cavalier magazine, like a lot of his early stories. In the October 1973 issue, I, of course, have a nice slipcased hardcover copy of Night Shift published by Cemetery Dance. Um, that's where I read it. And Gray Matter, I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to blow this for you. It's a really interesting story and one that you really got to read. I can't possibly do it justice. I could just completely blow it for you, but I can't really do it justice. You need to go and read it. It's basically a guy named Richie. He's in a bar and he has a beer, but something gets into his glass and he drinks it and it causes him to start changing. Now, this content warning, this is a gross out body horror story. If you don't like that kind of thing, don't even start reading this because it is gross. Gross like nothing else I've read by Stephen King so far. And I've read a lot of his early work here. Um, but I haven't and I read his most recent short story collection and I have yet to read anything this gross by Stephen King. And it ties into something that I was just reading actually today as I shoot this video. I was reading the next part of a chapter in Danse Macabre. I've been slowly reading through this. And in that section of the chapter, he's talking about I was a teenage werewolf and I was a teenage Frankenstein, the movies. Now, I've never seen either of those. So I'm going entirely by what Stephen King is saying. And his point is that in the 1950s, people were pretty safe. They were worried about the bomb, yes, but otherwise, the biggest fear they had in their life was changes to their body, like pimples or other gross things. And really, he made the point when you walk around in society, you don't see that many people that are disfigured. In earlier times, it was common on the streets to have people that had lost limbs or had picked up some kind of disease that disfigured them. But in our world, you walk down the street and you're not likely to see anybody. Maybe you'll see somebody with their hand in a cast or their foot in a cast, but that's about the worst you're going to come across. So we don't have a lot of that happening, but it's still a fear that something like that will happen to us. And in the real world, there are real fears of parasites and bacteria that is flesh eating. You can pick this up and it can harm you. So, this story where the guy drinks his beer and something in the beer starts a reaction inside of him that starts changing him. This is definitely a modern fear, something that we are afraid of, something that is still a relevant fear for us. And I've made the point before that monster stories like Lovecraft stories, they're interesting for their imagination, but they don't really keep me up at night. What keeps me up at night are the real horrors, the serial killers, the slashers, the things like the bomb. Um, those are the stories, the ones that are based on things that really are happening in our world. Those are the ones that keep me up at night. Books like Dean Koontz's Intensity, just somewhere right behind me on that shelf. Um, those stories can touch upon something because they are connected to our real world. They're fictional stories, but they're fictional stories that could really happen. Now, Gray Matter is, taking that the next step where he's starting with something that is a real world horror, but then he's blowing it way out of proportion into something that isn't real, but it still has that connection to that fear that, we could get something that will harm, that we could pick up something from our environment that will harm us. And so King makes a very good point that, in a movie like I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, the way the kid is changing in that movie is connected to a real world fear. And I think Stephen King does that a lot. He takes real world fears and exaggerates them, pulls them into the supernatural, brings more things into it than what are real, but they still have that foot in reality, and that's what really makes his horror so much more powerful and scarier. And other authors, I think, may actually do a better job than King does of that. But King is an excellent writer. And so even though this is a gross out story that you want to avoid if you don't like gross out stories, if that's a trigger for you, but if you can deal with it, this is a really excellent story, very well written, very finely crafted, a very powerful story. It's just a short story, so you can't expect too much from it, but within that format, King does a great job with this story, and this is a powerful story. I think it's, in my opinion, it's one of King's best, and so I've given this one a top tail. So what do you think? Do you agree with me or disagree with me that this is one of King's best stories? Leave comments in the comments section. I want to hear what you think. I want more than just my own thoughts on this. And leave it in the comment section of the video so that everybody can see it and learn from it and maybe think deeper about this. And otherwise, I hope you'll hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you're not a subscriber, and come on back for more Stephen King videos. My next Stephen King, another one from Night Shift, is Sometimes They Come Back. I'll be talking about that and a lot of other Stephen King and a lot of other authors in future videos here on Telltale Books. I hope you'll come back and join me.